Yeah,
Okay.
I'm all set.
Okay, well, welcome everybody to the Electoral Area Services Committee of Wednesday, September 16th. We have a confirmation of quorum, so I'll call this meeting to order.
Move adoption of the agenda. I would like a little brief opportunity to talk to the committee about the Vancouver Island Regional Library under new business. So I'd move the agenda as amended.
And I have two items of new business, one for the EA administration service and the second one about meeting remuneration.
Okay, you can put Gerald's first.
Is that three total then, Gerald, or is that two?
Well, my other motion is already in the agenda under contract with Seward Valley Communications. So just two under new business, EA administration and meeting remuneration.
Okay, can you put, Gerald's first?
Okay, no problem. Okay, so on the adoption of the public agenda as amended, all those in favor or anybody opposed? Seeing none, we'll move on to non-existent petitions and delegations. Adoption of the previous meeting minutes. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second. I wonder if Tom could enlarge the agenda on the screen a little bit, please. That's good. Thank you.
Okay. Any business arising?
I have one business arising. I have a question. I would like someone on staff to please confirm how the current grants and aid are now being dealt with. I'm waiting for grant and aid applications to be finalized, but I don't know how they're being dealt with right now. So because of the changing policies.
Nothing's been changed. We don't have a new policy yet, so it's status quo.
Okay, so I can simply contact and remind the people who normally apply for grants that it's time to submit and then deal with them normally.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, we have grants and aid on pretty much every agenda, so they're still under the status quo, as Dave said. Okay, any other business arising? No public considerations, staff reports, ESA development permit application for Botsford.
Move receipt of the report.
Second.
Okay, on the CAO's report, any comment, Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think John will speak to this.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, John.
Yes, good morning. The applicant wishes to build a house within 50 meters of the natural boundary of the ocean, which requires the issuance of a development permit to ensure that development and construction works will not harm the aquatic environment. A registered eagle tree located 115 meters away from the proposed structure no longer has a nest extant, and therefore the eagles have moved outside of the permit area. And provided the permit conditions are fulfilled, the development does not occur within 15 meters of the natural boundary. Our office recommends approval of this permit to Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I speak?
May.
Thank you. So we've had a couple other similar sized houses built on the beach at Shelter Point. And this one is proposed to be sited 15.7 meters from the ocean. On the other two recent builds down there within the last 5 years, because the land slopes down to almost sea level, where the house is going to be located. I know in a previous application, we were asking that the house move back from the ocean a little bit uphill towards the highway so that the ocean doesn't, you know, like the floodplain bylaw is what I'm asking about. Is the floodplain bylaw going to be adhered to, or are we going to need to look at that as far as the siting goes? I know this is an
Mr. Chairman, if I can answer that. The property is beyond the 15-meter trigger area for our floodplain bylaw, and any construction will have to meet the minimum of 1.5 meters above mean sea level. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Okay. So, so knowing that, I think that it looks pretty impressive, the house, and looks like we're building a new hospital down there. It's so big. But anyway, I would like to move the recommendation once we voted on receipt.
Yeah, we're still voting on receipt of the CAO's report. I just have one question. Are people aware, like developers, builders, owners, aware of the fact that we are in a situation that we hear about pretty much daily, called sea level rise, global warming, etc. And I don't understand why people keep applying to move closer to the water, especially in a situation where it's downslope, and why, as local governments, we are not cracking down, I guess you would say, on adhering to the floodplain bylaws. Generic question to Dave, Aniko, John, whoever.
Good question. I don't have an answer for you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, that's one down. Someone else will take a crack.
Mr. Chair, if I may, this application does adhere to the floodplain bylaw requirements. We have had minimal floodplain relaxation applications in the last 2 years. Personally, I think people are somewhat aware of, the potential impacts to, sea level rise and foreshore development areas. The province hasn't taken a step to assist local governments in, floodplain mapping, sea level rise type scenarios. However, at direction of the board, that may be something that planning staff can look at for 2021.
Okay, thank you. Anything to say, John, or not?
Mr. Chair, go ahead, John.
Sorry, Director Lee. I'm just going to concur with what Aniko has just said there. I would agree fully with that.
Okay, thank you. We would not, question to you, Dave or Tom, we would not in any way be putting ourselves in a libelous position with regard to damages by varying this bylaw?
Mr. Chairman, this application is for a development permit for protection of the aquatic environment. So it's quite separate from the floodplain issue, which is a separate application that's not triggered by this proposal.
All right, sorry. Okay, so on receipt.
I had one other question of planning, and it's to do with access to the house. On this house is near the corner, the sharp corner of the shelter point. It's almost towards the point there, and so shortly after we had one of the other 2 new houses built down there, there was quite a bad car accident for the owners trying to get in and out of their driveway coming out onto the highway on that corner, on the shelter point corner. Are access issues, are they being dealt with so that there's a safe access to the property from the highway? Because anybody sitting, there's no left turn lane there on the corner, and anybody sitting, signaling left to go onto their properties down there is at risk at all times of being rear-ended. So could you please tell me what kind of access they're going to have?
Thank you through the chair to Director Lee. These types of questions are unfortunately completely separate from this type of application.
I realize that, but
Right.
That's something I had nightmares about last night.
Right. So this is already an established parcel of land with an existing approved access from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. So the access that is currently there, I believe, is the access that the applicants will continue to use. And if there are issues with that, the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure would be the authority to address such issues.
Okay, so they're using an existing access. Okay, I know where that is. Thanks. And so once we receive it, I'll move the recommendation.
Okay, I'm calling for last time. Any other comments? Otherwise, could I please a vote of anybody opposed? Seeing none, it's carried. On to B, which is what the committee recommend that the permit be approved.
So moved.
Second.
And that the corporate officer be authorized to issue the development permit.
Any further discussion on that? All those in favor, or sorry, they were going to get used to that. Anybody opposed? Seeing none, thank you, it carries. And on to number 2, development permit application, Harry True Value Foods. On the staff report.
Move receipt.
Report.
Second.
Seconder.
Second.
Okay. All right, thank you. I do have some comments since this is in Area C. Do you prefer me to step down from the chair, or may I speak from there?
Well, Mr. Chair, let's let John present this, and then if you have questions, we can answer.
Sure, go ahead, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The applicant wishes to replace the existing bottle recycling depot at the Heriot Bay True Value Foods with a permanent enlarged structure that will match the aesthetic of the grocery store and provide a more efficient and hygienic facility to cater to the recycling needs of the local residents. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. If no one else wishes to speak to it, I would like to.
Go ahead, Jim. I don't mind you speaking from the chair.
Thank you. Okay, so this is the first I've seen of this. I haven't heard about it, and from the applicants or from staff. Recycling, as you all know, is the purview of the CBRD, which we're part of, the solid waste management function. This is very definitely a hot topic item on the island at the present time, all aspects of recycling. And this one is very problematic because people don't know what to do with their returnable bottles, and this facility has provided that service. So, I'm not against it in any way, but I do think that prior to it being ending up on an agenda with some questionable situations, being it's CBRD jurisdiction, it's not been talked about with the area director, that I would like to see that change in the future. And I would have certainly expected the owner manager of True Value in Heriot Bay contact me and tell me that that's due. So, I'm going to, of course, support it. I do absolutely agree with the fact that the dark skies policy must be implemented. We cannot have bright lights shining there at night. There's residences right across the street from it. And And they'll want to have security lights of some sort so people aren't breaking and stealing bottles. So anyway, I'm hoping that that's going to be adhered to and enforced. Nothing else on receipt. So all those in favor of receipt? Or sorry, anybody opposed to receipt? Seeing none. Okay, that item B, that the committee recommend that the development permit as attached be approved and the corporate officer be authorized to issue the
Mr.
So-
Chair, just before we vote, I had my mic muted. I didn't remember to unmute it. So I just, on the question of lighting, Quadra does have a dark skies policy. Wouldn't this development have to adhere to your dark skies policy?
Well, that's what I was asking. I assume
Like
that
with
it
amber
does.
lights? Yeah, with amber lights and downward facing light and everything, like something that isn't glaring at the neighbors?
Can we have staff respond to that, please?
So Chairman, yes, I can answer that. The dark sky policy does apply to Quadra Island, and this development will be required to adhere to that policy.
Okay, and enforcement?
It would, enforcement would, well, it's a policy of the board, so it would be expected that it be followed. As a policy, I'm not quite sure about its legal status as a requirement that people must follow it, but it certainly is a recommendation. I don't know if Alego can elaborate on that at all, or whether or not we can actually enforce the dark sky policy on Quadra or elsewhere, in fact.
It was my understanding that if it is in a development permit area, in a development permit, that it is enforceable. So maybe you can answer that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff would enforce the development permit requirements as part of the issuance of the development permit. So what measures would need to be taken to do that, I couldn't provide at this time, but certainly this is a requirement for the issuance of the development permit.
Okay, thank you.
So my question
Right.
is, has the lighting issue been included in the development permit as a condition?
Yes, Madam Chair, or Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Yes, I knew it was in there. I just want to make sure that it's enforceable. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I don't
anyone?
believe I'm not aware if we have a mover and seconder for B yet. If we have them, could you name them, please?
I moved it.
Director,
I'll second it.
thank you.
Who was the mover? Sorry?
Anderson.
Director.
Okay, thank you. No. Okay, so Anderson, Lee. Any further discussion? Anyone opposed? Carries. Okay, so onward to item 3, North Quadra Island burning regulations, citizen engagement. One of our favorite topics.
I received a report. This one hasn't burned itself out yet.
Second.
No, it seems to be populating our agenda frequently.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, yeah, I think it's going to be a standing report here for a while. I'll let Tom speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the committee may recall that there was a survey conducted in the North Quadra area primarily. I think there was some comments received from the South Island as well, but primarily the North Island, and a wide divergence of opinion on what, if anything, needed to be done regarding regulating open burning, etc. So those results were presented to the committee, and there was a suggestion that would come back after thinking through what the appropriate process might be going forward. And so what we're proposing is that we look into the concept of a citizens committee with people appointed from throughout the North Island area, just to meet with them and have further discussions and see if we can find the core of something that might be of interest to the community as a whole. Really, it's all about determining whether there's any interest going forward for the regional district to look at some kind of a service or not. And that's really would be the objective of this whole exercise.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that, Tom. And this would be one I would once again have to say that this is the first I've heard of it as far as forming a citizens committee. And I would have appreciated some at least notice that this was going to happen, since it will be a sort of standing committee on the island of appointed people that are my constituents. We don't normally do that. It would be sort of like an ABC, except they're not appointed by the director. They're being appointed by, I guess, staff. I don't know. Maybe the committee, the board, I don't know. Anyway, I would appreciate it in the future if something like this is going to come up, that somehow I'd be notified, included, whatever. I don't have a problem with the idea.
If I may jump in here, Mr. Chair, there's a report later on in the agenda in terms of communicating with directors, prior to reports coming on the agenda. The report is on the agenda. If you read the recommendation, that all it is the suggestion of an advisory group, and then a further report be prepared. So this is just an idea we're bringing forward to the committee without recommendations of appointments.
Right. I understand that, and I have read the further report, and I'll have something to say about that one too. This one, if the report is going to be coming forward, I would appreciate it if you took into consideration appointment not just from the North Island, but appointment from North and South, because there will be, I'm sure, discussions about who's going to pay. And we right now have a dividing line. The South pays through the South Quadra Island Fire Protection District. And if they are going to be asked to pay for another fire protection district or a combined fire protection district, their voices need to be heard also. So if you could just keep that in mind, this is not direction to staff, as your further report talks about, but this is a suggestion to staff. Okay, any further discussion? Sorry,
yes, Director
Brenda,
Lee. So I don't see in the survey results that there's enough support for proceeding with any committee. The survey results show a third of North Quadra are interested maybe in this service, but less than 10% of them would want to pay for it. And I think right now, North Quadra is better off with the BC Forest Fire Service than it would be with any kind of regional service extending from South Quadra. I just don't see it being very practical, and I have quite a lot of experience in establishing fire service areas because Black Creek Oyster Bay is helping Merville train all their firemen and help them get set up with a new, they went to referendum on a new fire hall for Merville. And they're also helping Mount Washington develop a service. But those communities have way more people to pay for it. They're willing to pay for it. And they're anxious to get fire protection, especially Mount Washington, which has had quite a few fires. So, I don't see there's a lot of public support so far on the survey, not enough to warrant setting up an ongoing committee. And yes, the director should be consulted. He is the elected representative. He has the right to say yes or no to these initiatives. It shouldn't simply be staff driven all the time. So, I mean,
Miss-
Quadra doesn't even have an APC, so why would they have all these other extraneous committees over issues that aren't even very well supported so far? I don't get it.
Mr. Chair, if I can comment, this is a report recommendation from staff. If the director or the committee doesn't support it, then don't support it. And we will tell the people that the issue about fire service is dead there. So it's not staff driven, it's a recommendation, and if the director and the committee doesn't care for it, then don't support it. And we will pass that recommendation on to the community.
Okay, thank you for that comment, Dave, and thank you for your comments, Brenda.
Okay.
I concur with what you had to say, and having been a part of this discussion all along, and then not being a part of it at the end, it's kind of weird. But an advisory group, I'm not necessarily. I'm not really in favor or against, but I think something like a short-term focus group maybe would be possibly a term that gets used now and then. A focus group of people that would come together 2 or 3 times to discuss alternatives or whatever. There has been absolutely no interest from South Quadra Fire, not just interest, but no ability for them to be able to take on fire service in the north. And there would be no ability for, a full fire service in the north. It's just too expensive. We just had a public hearing last week with a new fire hall, and we're talking $2 million just to build a fire hall. And it's already been determined that they would need at least 3 fire halls in the north if they were to have full fire service. So anyway, I would support a focus group, but not an advisory group. So is there any further discussion on the...
I'd like to speak.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Dr. Anderson.
Thank you. This is just one of these situations that strikes me where local government just doesn't have the legislative framework or nimble nature to be able to respond to community needs in a way that's really going to be particularly effective. I too am really concerned with the general tendency of not having directors from the area at least have a heads up about something so they can think about it a little bit. It seems like this is something that we might consider deferring for a month, such that the director from the area can speak further with staff and his constituents and put forward an alternate suggestion or support this one or put the whole thing on hold. But it seems like these kinds of delays could be avoided if there was just these upfront conversations. So I take your direction, Director Abram, but a month might not be a bad thing here.
Okay, I appreciate that, Dr. Anderson.
I don't see any need to put any time frame on it. Less than 33% say they're even interested in this, and less than 10% say they would be willing to pay for it. And it will cost millions to build a fire hall or several fire halls. So impractical. When you get survey information like this, I don't think the staff should leap to the most impractical solution to the problem. And, Quadra can talk about it all they want.
That's out of order. Mr. Chair, we're bringing a staff report with an option. If the committee doesn't like it, then don't support it. Staff is not leaping to
an impractical solution.
We're providing a recommendation. If you don't like it, don't support it. Please do not say the staff is leaping to an impractical solution.
Well, you have
That's
survey
out of
results.
order, Mr. Chair.
Hold it down now. Hold it down. This isn't a cross-table debate here. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, which is a recommendation from staff. Have we received the report, Tom?
Mr. Chairman, you're still on receipt of the report? And you have a mover and seconder for that.
All right. I have a mover and seconder, did you say?
You do, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Mr. Chair, if you verbally indicated your support to refer this for a month or whatever time frame, I'd happily move that.
Yeah, I would be fine with that, having it deferred.
So I'd move that we defer this matter to the next ESC.
Okay, is there a seconder? Motion is to defer to the next ESC. No seconder, so that does not carry. So we're back to the original motion, which is receipt of the report. All those anybody opposed to receipt of the report? Seeing none, we'd move on to item B, which is that the concept of an advisory group comprising local residents to investigate the matter of open burning regulation in North Quad Island be approved in principle, and further report be prepared to examine terms of reference for such an advisory group and the process for appointing its members.
So I'm not going to move that unless the director from the area indicates that that's what is wanted. It sounds like not. So at this point, I suggest that that not be moved. And if the director from the area or staff want to bring this forward at a further time, so be it.
Thank you. Is there a mover? Okay, hearing none. Non-item, I take it. We don't have to vote, right? Is that right, Tom?
No motion, no vote.
I wonder if I can make a comment, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Director Wally, go ahead.
Yeah, I think what the solution in situations like this would be is for the chair to step down, and then the chair could make whatever motions the chair would like or not. But we have no problem whatsoever with you discussing issues from the chair as a general principle. But nevertheless, it does limit you in as much as you're not able to make any motions or second things and so on. So in cases that affect Area C to this extent, it's just a suggestion. It would probably be a good idea. Then you could make whatever motions you want or whatever. I think it would probably work a little better than us trying to second guess what you think.
I appreciate that, and totally agree with you. I probably should have stepped down and made a motion to defer, but I didn't. And I believe are we finished with it, Tom, or do we have that option still?
Mr. Chairman, you have nothing on the floor, so it's your pleasure. If you wish to move on to another item, that's totally up to you.
Or can I make a motion to defer?
Well, point of order. We don't have any motion, well, moved and seconded, and I think we should just move on. I don't want to see it come back based on the survey results.
All right, so we're going to move on. We don't have all day, so contracts with Seward Valley Communications and the Village of Seward. This is Gerald. Report from CAO.
Aren't we on QCO sewer rate bylaw amendment?
Oh yeah, should be.
Number 4.
Oh yes, sorry, I got a little carried away on my down button here. Okay, so it's about the ASCII. This is item 4, ASCII Code sewer rates bylaw amendment. The receipt of the CAO's report.
No receipt.
Okay, moved and seconded a couple of times there. That's good.
Mike will speak to this, Mr. Chair.
Hey, Mike.
Good morning. Yeah, so this is the rate increases per the budget. We've had some demand to increase the costs just to keep the budget balanced. And so while significant, it's required just to keep the smooth operation of the system. We also had a quick look at parcel tax too, so we added that into the conversation. So we had a quick look. There's 228 parcels attached, so there's a possibility there for some flexibility in future revenue streams, and that would be in addition to the parcel tax we just rolled out for some of the extension properties. And the rest is in the report.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike. And, I have read the report, and I believe we passed a resolution that staff would write a letter to each of the participants of the service prior to going forward. And I'd just like to know if that has happened. Have they all been notified in writing by mail of what this is, what it means in both aspects, the increases, the parcel tax? So I guess that would be Dave. Or maybe
I believe
Mike. I don't know.
I believe the parcel tax letter was going out for the extension properties, those who choose not to commute the $4,447.
So, Mr. Chair, there's a couple parcel tax issues I think we're referring to here. One, as Mike just said, there's a parcel tax for the people to pay the capital cost of the upgrades in that 42 or 44 group. Those letters have gone out. What Mike is talking about here is there is a number of users, 40 or 50 of them within the system that don't pay anything. They are in the service area. They don't pay a user fee because they are not connected to the system. And we're suggesting introducing a parcel tax for all properties so that you can collect revenue from properties that are not connected to the system, because there's operation and maintenance costs to that system that go on year after year, and those properties are not paying anything. So what we're suggesting here is, as per the financial plan, that we increase the user fee rate, and we're suggesting that staff prepare a parcel tax bylaw for the QCO system in an effort to collect some money from all users of the system, because there's a number of people that are not paying anything but are still benefiting from it.
Okay, no, thank you for that. Just 1 second, please. I thank you for that, Dave. And I realize that now I have mixed two parcel tax scenarios. I'm sorry about that, but I think it would be a good idea for us to be writing a letter to the users, period, about both parcel taxes. So, everybody gets notified. Otherwise, I think there's going to be some massive confusion between groups of people. The one group of the people that, were the extension group, and the one group of people that have been there forever. And, they're going to compare notes. I know that for a fact. People do that. So is it possible just to amend this slightly to say that to start out, realize we're still on receipt. Maybe I'll wait till we get to the B. So
I have a question on, I have a question on the report. First, before we get to B. So there's 181 properties in the service area. They're going to get a 38% increase in costs. And I noted that there's no capital reserve transfer budgeted for 2020. That doesn't mean that if there are capital reserves that you could transfer to lower the impact of this 38% increase, that you couldn't make a budget amendment at this point.
There are no capital reserves. That's our point.
Okay, that's good to know. That's what I was wondering about, why we couldn't just do a budget plan amendment and transfer some capital over to help out. Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Okay, the reason for no capital reserves, Brenda, is because this service has been so underfunded and behind the eight ball for so many years, way prior to the present staff that we have, way back to the CSRD days. It was run on a shoestring. The capital reserves were always downplayed by staff to be something that we should be doing, and by the previous staff. And so now we're between a rock and a hard place. No two ways about it. So we do have to do something. I appreciate the fact that Dave has taken the initiative along with Mike to come up with a solution, but I am leery of popping something on the community without telling them first. So I would really appreciate that official letter going out to everybody saying, this is what we're doing. And then if they have problems with it, they can talk to us. So anyway, on receipt, is there anything further on receipt?
Yes.
On receipt.
Second.
Go ahead, Brenda.
Nova had a question.
Oh, that was you, Nova? I'm sorry. No, but you go ahead.
So I do remember, and perhaps staff or the director can correct me if I'm wrong, but my memory some decade ago is that we had this precise conversation before about implementing a parcel tax on the whole service area to garner some funds from people in the service area not currently hooked up to the system. And I remember, if I'm not mistaken, letters and or even a delegation to the board or EASC by John Wasilyu and potentially others speaking about the unfairness of that. So I would expect that we will be up for that again. And I can really sympathize with them. I understand in the report that there's suggestion that the property value might be increased because they're within a service area, et cetera, and future development potentials. But it's a very hard sell to ask people to pay for something that they are not using or getting direct benefit from, except from some potential future land value consideration. So I am not yet at all sold on a parcel tax. And I'm curious when we get to B, how much is B speaking to the specifics of the solution that this committee would be supporting?
So, Mr.
Because at this point, I wouldn't support B if the assumption was that it had a parcel tax embedded in it.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, I have personally operated dozens and dozens of water and sewer systems. This is the only one I've ever worked on that does not implement the parcel tax. The principle of a parcel tax is that the pipe in front of your house, whether you're using it or not, needs operation and maintenance, and that requires cost. All participants in the service, whether they're connected to it or not, pay a parcel tax. The user fee is for exactly that, using the system. So you have somebody that is within the service area that has the benefit of that pipe being maintained for 20 years and not contributing to it, and then at their convenience they contribute to it, and they've not paid any money for the last 20 years to operate and maintain it. This system is unique in that it does not collect a parcel tax, and 99% of them do, because there is in fact a direct benefit for you. When you connect to the system, it has been properly operated and maintained for the 5, 10, 20 years that you've not connected to it and not paid for.
So my question, if I might, through the staff, is if we pass B as presented, and perhaps we can get to this if somebody moves B, would that bring back a bylaw with a parcel tax embedded in it, or is that still up for direction from the committee?
So what the intent here is that we need to increase the user fee rates. That's what's before you, and Director Abram has talked about a letter going out. We can certainly do that if the bylaw to increase the rate is passed. If we introduce a parcel tax, that will be something that will not be implemented until 2021, but we will begin the process to create one.
Okay, thank you for that, Dave. And I have to say, Nova, thank you for your memory. It was very accurate what you had to say. It was so accurate that, and so hot at the time, that those landowners not only objected and made presentations and wrote letters, but they petitioned to have the service area reduced inside the bond so that all of their properties would be taken out of the service area. So we lost a number of parcels in that process because of the introduction of a parcel tax. So, I think it's, this is not an innocuous situation here. It's going to be a big hot button item. So can we just move on with the receipt of the report first of all, and then get into the details? Are there any opposed to the receipt? Seeing none, all those, okay, we're done. Okay, then on to B. The committee recommend that a bylaw be prepared, etc. And then that staff be directed to come back with an additional funding scenario or additional funding scenarios per the direction of the committee. So I guess this is where we would suggest whether we do or not put in a partial tax or write letters to people or what.
So I would move B if I understood from staff that amend the rates, that's user rates. Could I insert the word user in that sentence and have it be the same intent?
Well, we only have a user rate. We don't have anything else.
Yeah. Okay, so then I would move B, that the committee recommend that a bylaw be prepared to amend the user rates for the Quasgathy Cove sewer system to generate the revenue requirements identified in the 2024 financial plan.
Is there a seconder? Seconder, please.
You want to step down from the chair?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think I will do that. I will step down from the chair. Brenda, would you be willing to
Yeah, I'm the
sit into
chair.
the chair?
Yeah, Vice Chair.
Okay.
Yes. So
Okay,
Director
putting the
Abram,
hand-
would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you.
Just
Yes,
point
I
of
would
order,
second.
Director Abrams seconding this?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
So it's moved
I
and
am
seconded. Thank you. Any discussion,
moved.
Director Abram?
Yes, I would like to say that if amending the rates is all you were talking about, user rates as amended by Director Anderson, that is fine. People will still be notified of that. I would appreciate it. I would personally prefer that they be notified prior to getting their bill, which is, seems to be the standard for local government. Usually you send out the bill and you get to see what your amendment is. It seems that since this is a very large increase, though, some sewer people may not think it's a big deal, it's a big deal on a small island that experienced extremely high tax increases this last year. So I would ask whether it can be assumed that these people will be notified prior to receiving their bills, or do I need to work that into the actual recommendation?
Well, Mr. Chair, we can do a couple things. One, it is pretty standard practice for all local governments to insert notification with the bill, and that's just for a cost-saving measure. So the irony here is we're increasing the rates. We can send out a letter beforehand. That just costs extra money. So as soon as the bylaw passes, we can send out a letter notifying them, and then we will send out a bill following that.
Okay, I personally would like to see that happen, although it's going to generate a lot of discussion on Quadra Island. So I would like to amend the motion then, if you think it needs an amendment, or if it can just be.
It's fine. Direction is that we'll send, once the bylaw is passed by the board, we will send out a letter notifying people that there is a bill to come with an increase and explaining it. And then we will send out the bill.
Okay, and that'll go out, with a reasonable gap between the two.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. So
Okay,
B is
thank
fine
you.
with me.
So we have a moved and seconded. Any further discussion on B? Hearing none. Is there anyone opposed to B? Hearing none, that carries. And back to Director Abram for chair.
Well,
What about C?
Oh, is
if
there
you
a
wanna
C?
take-
Oh, sorry. Just
Yeah.
sorry,
Briefly
I
let
missed that.
Chair-
C,
Okay.
that staff be directed to bring back additional
Funding scenarios.
funding scenarios per the direction of the committee. Okay, need a mover and seconder for C.
Well, I would submit that C in and of itself is not sufficient. We would need to actually direct what funding scenarios we would like a further report on. And so far, the discussion has been on a parcel tax. Are there other funding scenarios, staff, that you would like the committee to discuss?
No. I don't know what else there is out there.
So, Director Abram, do you want to report on a parcel tax?
Yeah, I think the way it's worded right now, it's pretty vague and leaves it totally open to staff to brainstorm and come up with funding scenarios. Dave's answer just now was no, there are no other funding scenarios. So
Limited.
we should probably just, pardon?
Well, they're limited. I mean, we can bring back a scenario that says create a higher user fee or parcel tax. There's only so many means of collecting that, but if you want a report that shows additional increases to user fees that doesn't make a parcel tax necessary, we can do that.
Okay, so then I would like to change the C to say that staff be directed to bring back additional funding scenarios, including user fees, adjustment of user fees, and possible addition of a parcel tax per the direction of the committee.
Sure, that's fine.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
Moved and seconded as amended. So is everyone clear on their motion, on this motion?
Yep.
Okay, hearing no problems, I'll ask if anyone objects to this motion. Hearing none, the motion carries. Back to you, Director Abram, for the next issue.
Okay, now we'll go on to contracts with Seward Valley Communications on the Village of Seward.
Move receipt, Chair.
Second?
Second. Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I'll just let Mike give a little synopsis on this.
Hi there. Yes, these contracts were originally established in 2007. Seward Communications essentially ran independently since they were written, and the funds have been slowly growing on Seward's books. Many upgrades occurred over the years with the changing standards of the industry. Most of the original equipment has since been retired, so we're told by Seward Communications. There's still fiber up, but then the standards have changed on that too. In 2017, there was one major draw from the fund, and then a few years later, they've now sold off the assets, and they want to move on with the finalizing the sale. This is in a few months in advance of the contract's actual expiry date. We were earning monthly revenues about $318 a month, so it's not a big amount. That's about $3,800 a year. The assets on the books are now fully amortized. We have a half interest in the system. It was valued in 2007 at $37,000, and but it's fully amortized now. That's what I have.
Okay, so Gerald, did you have?
Well, I have a subsequent motion, Mr. Chair, after we move receipt of this.
Are we done with receipt? All those in opposed? Anybody opposed? Or is that you opposed, Gerald?
No, I'm not opposed. I'm in favor.
Okay. On receipt, opposed, there are none, so we'll move on to a subsequent motion by Gerald.
Yes, Edith has this, if she could put it up on the screen. But my motion basically is the exact same three options that staff is recommending in their report. So I would move that staff negotiate the settlement of contracts with Seward Valley Communications, Mascon, and the Village of Seward. And furthermore, that staff seek legal counsel in regards to the breach or breaches of contract and their termination. And furthermore, that the chair of the SRD board write a letter to the Village of Seward requesting a detailed ledger outlining all transactions affecting the internet upgrade fund since inception.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
Sorry. Moved and second.
Call from Alberta. Call from Alberta.
Just mute your mic, Director Lee.
Okay.
Hi there,
Brenda,
I'll
you
call
can
you
just
later.
mute.
I'm in a meeting.
You can just
Okay, I'll
mute
call
your
you
mic.
later. Bye.
Okay, so we have a motion by Gerald. Is it on the board?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any comments, questions, whatever from anybody? There was a seconder, Brenda.
Good.
Any comments? Okay, anybody opposed? See none, that passes. Okay, number 6. 2021 Community Resiliency Investment Grant. Report from the CAO.
Move receipt of the report.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Sean will speak to this for us.
Good morning, Electoral Area Services Committee. What you have in front of you are recommendations for this year's intake of the Community Resiliency Investment Grant. This grant has come forward to the board a couple times in the past, but one thing to point out how it has changed this year is whereas all local governments before were eligible for $25,000, whether you were a municipality, regional district, First Nation, now regional districts are eligible for a $50,000 base funding for fuel mitigation and education activities and an additional $50,000 per electoral area. So before were we only eligible for 25, now we're eligible for up to 250,000, which is pretty exciting. You'll see a bunch of recommended projects in there. I'm not going to go and read them off line by line, but happy to take any questions or comments on either of them. I will say that the recommendations for electoral area A and B are based off of the recommendations from the updated community wildfire protection plans, with electoral area A receiving its plan a couple months ago and Cortez's updated plan just being in the works. Areas D and C need updated wildfire plans as Union of BC Municipalities considers any plan over 5 years old to be pretty much null and void and not eligible to guide further recommendations. So electoral area D's is in 2014 and electoral area, Quadra Islands is in 2011. The fuel management prescriptions on Cortez Island were recommended from the consultants that are updating their wildfire plan and supported by the fire department and the Cortez General Forestry Partnership, who owns the license tenure on those lands. The other fuel prescription areas that are recommended are for regional district owned lands with the Surge Narrows Stores, Seward Valley Fire Hall, and Walters Island Community Center. I'll turn it over to any questions.
I have a question, Mr. Chair. So if you go ahead, I have a question. Am I recognized?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I have a question for Mr. Koopman. I don't, if you go ahead and apply for these grants, which obviously we should apply, do we have to state how we're going to spend the money right up front, or can we decide after we get the money? For example, I don't think there's much understanding that the Black Creek Oyster Bay Fire Department serves Oyster River, Oyster Bay. And the Black Creek Oyster Bay Fire Department has done, intense fire smart activities. And they have pamphlets and they've gone door to door and they've done mock evacuations in the Oyster River, Oyster Bay, and Black Creek areas. So I don't understand why we would have to spend $9,500 printing pamphlets that are Campbell River pamphlets about how to garden, like gardening tips on fire smarting your property, when, you know, Area D is completely different from Campbell River. Area D does have trees in our yards. I must have 20 different varieties of trees on my property. And I don't think that it equates to gardening tips from Campbell River. I think that we need to either look at the rural prescription for Fire Smart, or look at what resources are already available through Black Creek Oyster Bay for Oyster Bay, Oyster River, because some of the things that I think you're going to come up with this pamphlet from Campbell River on gardening is not applicable in Area D at all. So can we apply for the grant and then decide that, you know, what to spend that money on in a more practical way later?
So to Director Lee, through the chair, we do have to cost out and outline each specific item that we are applying for in the grant. So to the answer to that question is no, we can't just apply and figure it out later. Every portion of the grant under this year's intake, it's mandatory that we do an education component. And while the Campbell River Guide to Gardening does say Campbell River on it, we could apply for the education part of that grant to adjust that booklet to the rural areas and develop an Area D Fire Smart Guide to Gardening, absolutely, if that's the wishes. The Fire Smart Guide to Gardening booklet we developed, we focused on the Western Hemlock Biogeoclimatic Zone, which does encompass all of the Strathcona Regional District. So the plants and the bird windows, and I'd say about 85% of the recommendations in that booklet are applicable to our electoral areas as well. But so if it's the will of the committee to allocate a portion of the grant to modifying that document so that it's specific for each electoral area, that would be considered an education component, and we could do that as well.
Okay, so for Area D, I would like to see that $9,500, instead of being reprinting the pamphlet from Campbell River. When I do a pamphlet in Area D, it costs like $2,500 to print and distribute, not $9,500. And I think we should develop a tailor-made communication to people in Area D that is considerate of their different land use in Area D, that there's country residential and farm property and property with tons of trees, and it's not a matter, I don't even think about gardening. Gardening is like not one of my main focuses on my land. My land is, my focus is on the natural environment and not gardening. And so, I don't even think it applies. I don't even think the concept of land use in Campbell River applies to Area D. So I think we need our own pamphlet, especially for $9,500. We could get a really nice.
Can we just ask Sean that we take those into consideration and we move on?
May I speak, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Noah.
Thanks. I generally concur with what Director Lee is saying. I think that if people receive something that says Campbell River and they're not Campbell River, they kind of, grunt and throw it out. So I imagine that there's a lot of really good substance in that. If it could be somehow simplified, I don't know if waterproof paper is required. Anyway, you don't need us to get into that level of weeds here. Generally, I think this is great. I would echo a lot of what Director Lee said for your consideration, if you like, when you're writing the grant. One question I had is the fuel prescriptions that we have. on Cortez or anywhere in the electoral areas. My memory is that they're around sort of coarse woody debris removal and ladder fuel management, etc. Has there ever been any consideration of prescribed burns? This is something that I've been hearing ideas about here in this community now that we have a hard time breathing and are much more fire aware than almost ever. I've been hearing some people saying that there's some communities, not in this region, but in other regions, who are now going back to prescribed burns. Is that something we've considered?
To Director Anderson through the chair, the prescribed burn method is an alternative method that we could pursue under the grant as well. My understanding is that BC Wildfire has been supporting prescribed burns more in the interior, where fire is a more natural feature of the landscape than the coast environment area. But
Yeah.
that being said, they do have a prescribed burn for a specific forest, and sorry, it's escaping me right now, outside of the Nanaimo area. But that is something that we could consider in the tender if we get the grant, is asking the consultant, for each of these specific landscapes, what would be more appropriate, fuel removal or a prescribed burn in the area.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
Can I speak, Mr. Chair?
Yes, you may.
Just a question for staff. I forget now after reading that report, but was this grant going to be 100% funded, or do we have a portion to fund?
To Director Wally through the chair, 100% funded.
Okay, and my only other comment is for Area A, most of this is not applicable in as much as we're totally surrounded by TFL. I recognize that we have some SRD properties that you mentioned there that are effective. But anyway, as far as the gardening pamphlet and as far as area is concerned, I think it's a total waste of time and you don't have to bother sending it to Savory.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, yeah, I didn't really get a clear, I know I asked a double-barreled question, but as far as the Oyster River, Oyster Bay area being administered, their fire services being administered by the Black Creek Oyster Bay Fire Department, and the fact that the Black Creek Oyster Bay Fire has already got pamphlets for Fire Smart. They've already gone through Oyster River and Black Creek with mock evacuations. And when they did that, when they knocked on people's doors in the mock evacuation area, they distributed packages with the pamphlets, with signs for your windows saying whether you're okay, with information on Fire Smart. They've already been doing this for a long time. And I would hate to think that Strathcona is going to send, possibly contradictory information out to Black Creek, to the Oyster Bay, Oyster River area, when they've already been getting information, and it's good information. It's not about gardening. It's about protecting your, if there's a wildfire, how you can best protect your house from burning down.
I think that we need to move on, Brenda, and that Sean can tweak this however he likes, as long as we prove the concept.
Yeah,
Anything
okay,
else?
so let's go.
Yeah,
Okay.
well done, Sean. Thank you.
All right, so this is still on receipt, Tom, is that correct?
Correct.
All those in possibly opposed? Seeing none. B, committee making a recommendation for an application to the Community Resiliency Investment Grant Program, et cetera, and the regional district commit to overall grant management.
So moved.
Seconder. Is there a seconder?
To apply for the grant.
Yes, this is 100% money, folks.
Yeah, I'll second it. begrudgingly.
Okay, moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Anybody opposed? Thank you. Carried. Grant opportunity, Surgeon Store Site Revitalization, report from the CAO.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you,
Mr. CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quickly, this is just a grant opportunity for through the rural and northern communities. We applied in 2019 for this. We weren't successful. We have rejigged the application based on the feedback we've got from the province. However, with the submission of the application, we also need the endorsement of the board, and therefore we're asking for committee support.
Okay, thank you, Dave. And having spoken with you about it yesterday, being surprised that it was on our agenda for today when I actually met with the minister yesterday about it. You did explain to me that it doesn't really matter. Basically, they already have it, and this is just the board endorsing. So, one seat. Anything else? Anybody opposed? Carried. Okay, and we have B, an application be submitted to Investing in Canada.
Move B.
Northern Communities Grant Program.
Second.
Okay. And crucial part at the bottom there, the region district supports the project and commits to its share of costs or cost overruns associated with the project. There is a 17%, I believe, cost requirement. This is a shared grant between feds, province, and local government. Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? I did have a good discussion with Minister Selena Robinson yesterday. Staff have been talking with their staff to cross all the T's and dot all the I's. So hopefully this is going to get passed. It's for $2.2 million, which is in our world a big deal. In their world, not so much. Okay, all those in not, sorry, anybody opposed? Seeing none, it's carried. We have voting rights, electoral area matters.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. I'll have Tom speak to this, please.
Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just pulling up the report because it's been quite a while since I wrote this. So there was a there was a motion passed, I believe, at the previous East meeting that staff enter into consultation with directors before providing reports on agendas dealing with that particular area. And the question arose as to, well, who is entitled to vote? Because that is germane to the question of director involvement in preparation of reports. So this report simply outlines what the voting rules are that apply in the case of services and non-service questions that arise. And basically, there's a couple of simple rules that are worth knowing, which is anything that is part of general administration or outside of a service is the entire board, and otherwise it's service participants, unless there's only one participant, in which case the whole board votes as well. And so this really tries to simplify that voting question that always arises.
Yes, and this one was about, I believe it was about the halls. Is this the one? Correct, Dave?
Well, it's about an ongoing topic in terms of consulting the area directors before the reports are written or put on the agendas.
Right.
Can I speak, Mr. Chair?
Topic that brought up. Yes. Go ahead, Joe.
Thank you. Yes, the way I look at this is, and I think it's worth considering, is that when staff gives us a report to Electoral Areas Committee on various topics that we are previously unaware of, we should consider this as written notification with the director. Because once it comes here, the director is free to do whatever they want. They now, knowing what the situation is and what the background information is about, we can either defeat it or we can make a different motion or defer it or do whatever we want. So personally, I don't have any problem with this. It's the way it's always been since I've been a director. And once you get used to it, it works pretty good.
I agree with
Thank you, Joe.
I'd like to speak.
Go ahead, Noma.
Yeah, I can see staff's concern about consulting directors beforehand and therefore having them have some hand in unduly influencing staff's recommendation. And I know there have been difficulties in communication at times between directors and staff. So I can appreciate the caution. What I've experienced over the course of the 12, however limited they are, 12 years I've been here, is a real shift from fundamentally feeling like an ally and a collaborator with staff to not feeling that way. And I really preferred the former. And it meant that there were more regular conversations between staff working on reports and myself about things that were happening in this area. I could offer any insight. Staff could take it or leave it. Certainly not strong-arming them. But my knowledge about the area was sought and considered valuable to integrate into recommendations that were brought forward. And that's no longer the case. What happens now is staff makes their best professional recommendations, often quite without a lot of knowledge about what's happening on the ground. And then we're in a position where we're in a minority with other directors who don't know a whole lot about it. And then we often have to delay or take up a whole bunch of time here at committee and board that would be unnecessary. So I really, really value, or did really value, feeling like I was a useful member of a team. And that was very different than trying to strong arm staff into any particular recommendation. I've almost never now know what's happening between the regional district and the community unless it either comes on an agenda or I hear about it from my community members. And that's really disheartening to me. So I think that voting rules are one thing, and absolutely we must follow voting rules. I don't think that's what this request for a report was about at all. And I don't think it needs to become, formal policy that's adopted by any board. It's about involving directors in the business of the areas that we represent as things are developing and maturing. And it's a culture shift. It's not something that we can mandate or legislate, but it's a culture shift that I've really been sad to see shift the way it's going. And I would really love to be more involved and feel like a valuable member of the team now. I go months without hearing from staff about anything, and that used to just not be the case.
Thank you, Director Anderson. I'm going to chime in here and say I absolutely support every word that she said. That is exactly, I couldn't have said it any better. It was all factual and true. And this report came out of a discussion around whether or not we should have any say in contracts with places like the Quadra Community Hall and perhaps the halls on Cortez. It was about directing staff. There is no desire whatsoever from the directors that I know of to direct staff, but just for notification or any of those things. Plain and simple. That's all we want. And we can talk to staff and tell them, like on the hall thing, I could have, and I had said to them before that really wasn't crazy about the idea of having camping inside of our staff or our Strathcona Regional District Hall, possibly burning it down. And that was just my opinion. I'm not crazy about it. It's up to them what they decide on and what they come up with and what they bring to the board. But to have some pre-information would be so valuable. And it used to be, that was said by Director Anderson, there used to be a much more collaborative approach between staff and the director before this shift that took place. And I think it's a step backwards, in my opinion. And I'd like to see us go back to having discussions. They're just discussions. Whatever comes forward to the committee is what's being put forward by staff for us to consider as to whether or not we're going to pass it or not. So yeah, I agree with Gerald that yeah, we can get the report and we can turn it down or not. It goes quicker if you do it the other way. If you just have a little chat with the director, whoever that may be. So that would be my hope, and I don't see that in this report at all. So I'm not going to vote in favor of it.
Another comment.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. I just thought, okay, yeah, you'll talk.
So sorry, I could pull the report back up in front of me, but there was a line in the report that referenced the Director Code of Conduct relationship with staff, and therefore how this kind of collaborative communication would go against that item of conduct. And I didn't look up the Code of Conduct, could staff remind us how this collaborative communication would go against the Code of Conduct recommendations for director staff communication?
Well, I'm going to respectfully disagree with the chair and Director Anderson in that when it's referred to as collaborative communication, I call it interference, and that's where it is in the Director Code of Conduct. I don't think for a minute that discussion in open session, as Director Anderson said, and the chair agreed, is a waste of time. I think we are here to discuss in open session, transparent governance, the issues. And I don't think we're here to just rubber stamp and get through things as quick as we can. So the point of us bringing reports and recommendations, as Gerald said, for the directors, for the committees, for the board's discussion, it's there. Once it gets there, you can discuss it in open session and do whatever you want, accept recommendations, make new ones or not. But I think it's rather disappointing that we're talking about discussing these reports in open session as a waste of time.
So could I have my question answered? I found the line here that speaks, says, with respect to the motion that was deferred, it is worth noting that the practice being recommended may run counter to the Director Code of Conduct Bylaw 2018, which limits the interaction between staff and directors. Could I be reminded what it says about limiting communication between staff and directors?
Well, I don't have it in front of me right now, but we can provide that for you.
Because if indeed it limits our ability to speak about matters to better serve our communities in the development of recommendations, I think that that's a real sadness.
Well, this report came at the discussion of 2 contract agreements, and I will assure you that the board would very unlikely delegate authority for staff to deal with individual directors on contract negotiations, which is clear interference.
So, this has come up over and over and over again. It's come up multiple times on this agenda as well, not about contracts, but about just not having any heads up or any opportunity to share on the ground information with staff in the development of their reports.
Well, I'll remind the committee, this is just for information. If you have a resolution for the board, you're free to make one.
So I would ask then of staff, we had requested that there be some kind of standard consultation. We've been given the voting reminder of the voting requirements, which in my mind are 2 quite separate things. what I'm really hearing is that the staff culture now doesn't support what the directors are requesting, and that there's no direction to staff that we could give that would shift that. Is that your understanding?
Yes, you could make a board resolution, and that could be brought to the board in terms of what you would prefer, and then the board would have to delegate that authority. Absolutely.
Can I speak, Mr. Chair?
Yes, you may, Jared.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think in this particular case, the committee is spinning its wheels and wasting its time. You're pursuing something that's not going to happen. It will never happen at the board table. You need to get used to the way it works and figure out how to operate under it. It's not a difficult thing.
Okay, so basically you're saying we have to work around it rather than work with staff.
Well, I think after staff gives us written notification, which is the CAO report, then from that point on, we're notified, and we can talk to staff all we want, both privately and at the committee, and make any motions we want and do whatever we want. I don't see where there's a problem personally.
So it's just a culture shift from one of preemptive collaboration and consultation to one of voting rights and delegated authority. And that's just the different culture we live in now, Director Abram, I guess.
Yeah, I'd say get used to it.
I would like to just mention, Gerald, one of the things that under your comment, the way it's being done here, or being suggested that it be done here, and the way you're supporting, is it comes forward and then it most likely goes back, which means another month, another staff report, and then we come back again a month later. In the meantime, the information is public, it is on the web, and everybody is reading it as if it's, factual. This is the way we're going. People make assumptions, but either way, if you want to do it this way, fine. If you want to do it the way Director Anderson and myself have suggested, that we get back to the old culture as opposed to the new culture, that's totally up to you guys. So let's move on.
I would like to chime in. Director Lee.
Is that
Hello?
Was that chiming in? Yes. Hi, Brenda.
Yeah, sort of chiming in. I'm not in favor of this whole attitude that the elected officials don't count and that they're not to be advised or consulted before something goes to the board. So I would say that I'd be voting against this, because this report to me is at the core of the dysfunctional problems that the SRD is having. And if there was more respect for the fact that the elected official does represent, like I represent close to 5,000 people. And when I want to make my constituents' views known, my constituents don't understand why people that have nothing to do with their elected area and their lives and how they are having their services managed, that people from disparate communities that know nothing about the situation are voting on it. They don't understand that. And the very least we can do is to just let the elected official know about issues coming up and have some input into it. And this whole report is just flying in the face of that. And it's the core of the problems with the SRD.
I'll remind you, Mr. Chair, that the committee has input right now. We're not taking away the committee's input or the director's input. You have it at committee.
Okay, so we're going to drop this now. We're done. We've had enough discussion about it. We're on receipt, basically. If there's no further discussion, which I'm hoping there won't be, can we please decide whether or not we're going to receive this report? Are there any opposed to receipt?
Director Lee's opposed.
Opposed.
And opposed myself.
I think that's the first time I've ever voted in opposition to receipt of a report in 12 years.
Melissa. Okay, so it's not received. Okay, so then we're going to move on to request for economic development funding, Quadra Island Conservancy and Stewardship Society.
Move receipt.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Receipt of the CAO. Anything from staff?
Nothing
Okay.
yet. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Leach. And onward, committee recommend that the board approve. This is B, Economic Development Grant, Quadra Island Conservancy Stewardship Society, $1,500. Electoral receipt. Any discussion? Anybody opposed? Okay, that's carried.
Mr. Chairman, if I could,
what?
like catch the mover and seconder on item B.
Oh, okay, so I'm sorry. Harold, one of them.
Move B.
Second. Director Lee.
Okay, Brenda,
Thank you.
here we go. Okay, so we're on to number 10, request for financial assistance, Quadra Cat Rescue. This is a report from the CAO.
Move receipt.
Seconder,
Second.
okay, Gerald, Brenda. Any discussion from staff?
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Nobody opposed, so we'll move on to B, which is that we recommend a grant of $1,500 from GIA to Quadra Cat Rescue. All those
Moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Anyone opposed? Okay, that carries. On to bylaws, J, OCP zoning bylaw amendment number 9495, Shellick.
Move receipt.
Second.
Nothing from staff.
Okay, so
Nothing from staff.
nothing from staff, nothing from planning. I do have a question of planning. What are the minor amendments? I have seen this so many times, and this is once again an issue of not seeing something before it comes on the board or the committee agenda. So Shellink is back. What were the amendments, if I could ask?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In light of what you just stated, this actually is the opportunity to provide advice to both the area director and the committee that the applicant is wishing to proceed with moving this application forward. This is an opportunity for the applicant and staff to advise that there will be an upcoming staff report that would include amendments to action this item. The area director and staff and the applicant have had multiple conversations with respect to what those amendments to the bylaw would look like. We had a discussion probably over a year ago with respect to the bylaws that are currently sitting at second reading with the area director. We went through a number of items within the bylaw which the area director wished that we have addressed. This is the opportunity for direction to staff from the area director and the committee to action those recommendations. The bylaws that are provided before you are the bylaws that were given first and second reading back in 2011. Yes, 11. So the application is primarily the same proposal as what went before the board back in 2011. We have finally ironed out the details with respect to servicing, both sewer and water, and we will be making minor amendments to the bylaws that were provided first and second reading to clarify commercial uses within the C2E zone and limit cabin sizes and reaffirm the commitment to amenities, including parks and trails.
Question.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that, Annika. The reason I asked is because we have seen this so many times and we have amended it so many times that I'm unclear. I was unclear prior to your speech just now, that was unclear of which amendment or which changes, amendments we're talking about. And you've just mentioned a number of them, and we'll see it again. Brenda, I think you were trying to speak.
No, I wasn't, but I just, this is a proposal for 54 additional 1 hectare lots in the tourist commercial for campgrounds and associated docks. And we, the electoral areas, or held this at second, right? Until we got a few things ironed out. So once it gets third, once the amendments are made and if it gets third, do we go to public hearing at that point?
I believe we go to public hearing before third, do we not?
Yeah, right after second.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The recommendations will be brought forward to board to make minor amendments to the bylaw at second reading, with a request that the bylaws be given authorization to conduct public hearings so that we have public input on the final bylaws prior to bringing the bylaws back to the committee for consideration at third.
Good. So we will be going back to public hearing on. We'll be going to public hearing on this.
That's correct. And I do have
because
one
that's no
that.
minor thing. Like the 54 lots, that's not minor at Gulland Harbor. So I want to see what they are, what the minor amendments are, include.
That's not a minor amendment. Okay, that's not a minor amendment.
No.
So we can get rid of that.
I have a question.
If I could just say one thing, I am a bit concerned, and maybe staff could start considering this. This is a major application for Quadra Island, and we are in a pandemic, in a COVID situation, and we will probably be talking about a virtual public hearing. I'm concerned about that, and whether or not, we have to hold this off until we're at a point where we can meet in a room or what, I don't know. Just a thought. Nova.
Thank you. I'm just wanting to get clarity from staff. So the bylaw we have in front of us is, 9 years old now. The recommendation before us is that minor amendments be provided to the board. So are those, I'm assuming, minor amendments to the now 9-year-old bylaw that received second reading? Are those minor amendments to that bylaw something that staff are going to put forward to us for our consideration, either now or at the board, or are you expecting the director from the area to put them forward? That sounded, Aniko, like perhaps this was the moment you were saying for the director from the area to provide the minor amendments that he had wanted from your discussion, I gather, a year ago. So this is just one of those moments where if you wanted the director to come, if I'm understanding you correctly, if you'd wanted the director to come prepared with those minor amendments to put on the floor today, that some kind of heads up might have been valuable? Or do you have minor amendments based on those discussions a year ago that you will be recommending, and have I missed them? Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. For clarification, staff is aware of the minor amendments that the area director suggested occur to the existing bylaws that are sitting at second reading, and the applicant is aware of those as well. There was a very thorough sit-down discussion with respect to the current densities and permitted uses of the bylaws, and where there may be some room for improvement to have more amenable options to both the director and staff and the public when we do potentially get to the position to bring this forward to the community at public hearing. So in short answer, I believe that we do have those suggested amendments that were provided during that meeting, and we will reaffirm with both the director and the applicant prior to moving forward. This is just an opportunity for the director to agree that amendments will be forthcoming.
So you're not looking at this time, either from staff or directors, for any amendments that would be at a later time as opposed to now?
I believe that, through the chair, I believe what we're looking for right now is support from the committee to action the bylaws that have been sitting at second reading for some time by bringing forward amendments that were presented during a meeting with the area director, staff, and the applicant.
Thank you.
So could I ask Aniko, is there an opportunity after this meeting to have further discussion, not direction, with you, planning staff, Shellink, concerning the minor amendments, or perhaps an amendment to the minor amendments between now and the next time this comes back?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I believe it's in the best interest that when we come back the next time, we are all on the same page so that we can proceed. That the applicant really would just like to have these bylaws considered and have an answer so that he can proceed with either this development or some other option. He's just feeling as though I believe we've kind of exhausted all of these discussions. He believes that, you know, we have addressed all of the historic concerns that were associated with the file, and we're hopeful that, you know, we can bring something forward that is agreeable to all and put it out there to the public for their input.
Okay, that didn't quite answer my question as to whether or not I will have an opportunity to speak with you or your planning staff concerning what's going to come back to us again.
Mr. Chair, myself and the applicant are more than willing to have a sit-down discussion.
I would move that this item be referred back to staff and the director and the proponent for discussion before it comes back to the committee for a decision.
Okay, there's a motion to refer it. Not sure if that will accomplish anything positive.
Well, I think that if you need to be refreshed on amendments to the bylaw at second reading, to be clear what's being proposed, then yeah, I think that's in order.
I appreciate that, Brenda. What I'm saying is that I was just told by Aniko that there is an opportunity for us to sit down and talk between now and the next meeting. So I don't know, we need to refer it. We could just.
Well, but if you're asking the committee to endorse recommendations to bring forward amendments to the bylaw, I'd like to know that the amendments are what is required and what is agreed to with the proponent and planning and yourself. Like, I'd like to know that it's been thoroughly vetted before amendments are brought forward.
Okay.
Because otherwise, we're going to have to amend the amendments.
If you read E, it
just
says,
a point of procedure, there isn't a seconder to the referral motion. I concur with the chair. There's a good way of doing this in a modified B. So can we move on to that, to receipt of A?
Is there a mover or a seconder to the referral? So hearing none, we're back to the motion. And under B, I think it is quite clear that the committee is recommending that minor amendments to the amending bylaws be provided for the board's consideration. So that means, to me anyway, tell me if I'm wrong, that there will be further discussion between now and the next presentation to the board. Is that correct, Aniko?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's my understanding that if it is the will of the director to have a sit-down conversation and work over proposed amendments to the bylaw, that both staff and the applicant are more than willing to do that and would like to do that to ensure that we can proceed with giving consideration to these bylaws at second and potentially moving forward to some form of public hearing.
Okay, perfect. All right, so back to, what are we on, Tom? Receipt?
B.
You are on receipt, Mr. Chair.
Great. Okay, voting on receipt. Any opposed? A and B,
So
committee recommend
I'd move
minor
B,
amendment.
committee recommend that minor amendments to amendments bylaw 94 and 95 be provided for the board's consideration.
Second.
Seconder,
Clear understanding that, under the clear understanding that that will indeed involve staff, Director Abram, and the applicant.
okay, is that understood by everybody? If not, speak up now. If not, if so, then we'll move forward on the vote. Are there any opposed? It's carried. No correspondence, director's reports, Cortez Island zoning updates.
Move receipt
This
of
is
report.
This is a cannabis issue. Okay. Receipt of the report, seconder.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor, or sorry,
Speak,
anybody opposed? Anybody opposed?
can I speak to the report, please, Mr. Chair?
Sure, okay, I'm so sorry, I missed the discussion part.
Thanks.
Discussion.
So super straightforward. A year or so ago, the board directed that the cannabis regulations be updated for electoral area B and C. Because applications came in, I believe, in area D, then area D was updated recently. Area C has just gone to public hearing. But because in area B, we referred this matter to the general zoning bylaw update, which hasn't had any work on it in 2 years, it's just got shelved indefinitely there, which does not seem like a fair or appropriate thing to do. And so because this isn't application driven, as was the case for area C and D, that therefore made it onto the agenda, I then need to bring forward this report, it seems like. I asked at the last meeting that meet with staff over this. I've reached out to staff. I understand it's end of summer, but haven't heard back. So this is the only way I know how to bring it on the agenda. So after receipt of report, I would like to move just a very simple motion that asks staff to bring forward an update to the zoning bylaw to allow for cannabis production.
Okay,
In the C and D.
Still on receipt. Anyone opposed? Okay, nobody opposed. You have a subsequent. No.
Yeah, that staff prepare a zoning amendment bylaw for electoral area B.
That it?
No, it's being, I think you're on the phone, Jim. It's just being written out, so I'm not.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I see it is actually. I know I'm on Teams.
Oh, okay. So that staff prepare an amendment bylaw. Sorry, an amendment. I'm sorry, Edith. The staff prepare an amendment to the electoral area B zoning bylaw.
Edie, can you please increase the size of the font?
Just a reminder that it's helpful if you have these resolutions prepared that you could send them into Edie beforehand.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm sorry. The staff prepare an amendment to the electoral area B zoning bylaw to permit cannabis production and sale. Without the requirements for site-specific zoning, rezoning. So this is very much in line with the approach Area D just took.
Okay, I have a mover, Director Anderson. Is there a seconder? Okay, I'll step down from the chair. Second. Brenda, it's yours.
Thank you. So, I'm happy to have further debate when staff brings a zoning bylaw amendment forward around whether we need site-specific zoning or not. I trust that the committee will debate that. I know that Director Abram and Lee took different approaches and perhaps don't support each other's approaches. So I'm happy for a robust discussion, but I'm not prepared for this just to not be addressed because we don't have an application driving it. So I'd appreciate the support of the committee such that Cortez can have this matter be addressed just like the other areas.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further discussion on the amendment that is, or the motion that is on the screen? Okay, seeing none. Anyone opposed?
I'm opposed.
Okay, one opposed. It's carried.
Thank you,
That
Mr. Chair.
brings us to-
Madam Chair.
Yes. Okay, on to new business. Gerald, you have 2 items of new business.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Number 1, regarding administration service, if Edith could put up my motion on the screen, please. The situation as I see it is that electoral areas don't want the municipal directors dictating requirements concerning our own grants and aid. And they have refused to allow us to have our own grant and aid service. So therefore, I figure we can do the same thing that we have always done for regional grants and aid, which is to fund them from an administration service. So in our case, I'm proposing the same.
Yes, I actually, I used Google Maps yesterday just to find out exactly where you're located and also to see what your location is.
Somebody speaking over the meeting?
Okay, so I'm proposing.
Well, what is your request with regards? I just want to make
Wolf,
sure we're
I believe
talking
you
about
need to mute your mic. Wolf, can you please mute your mic?
we sign agreements with the federal.
Can somebody go down to his office and tell him to mute his mic?
March 2020 and COVID-19. So we had a little bit of a delay on this project. Then
Am I good here?
Okay, it looks like I can't tell for sure because he's not on my list. Okay, no, he's not muted.
Do I have the floor, Mr. Chair?
Yes, I just want to make sure that you have the floor and not 2 people. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So anyway, in our case, I'm proposing the same rules within this plan as we had approved when we designed the original electoral area grant and aid service. And there was 3 things, namely, 1, that this would only be for those electoral areas that wish to participate. And those who do, at budget time, we would put into our electoral area administration service whatever amount we each would choose. We would only spend to the maximum of what we have put in. And the third thing, at year end, any unspent surplus would just roll over. So to this end, I move that a report be prepared for electoral areas consideration that outlines the options for using the electoral area administration service to fund electoral area grants and aid for those electoral areas that wish to participate.
Second.
Second.
Nice.
Hey, Brenda, can I just ask as a friendly amendment that you say for the electoral areas committee's consideration?
Yes, that's what I mean.
I know that's what you mean. I just want to make sure it's in writing.
Sure, that's a friendly, just stick that in there.
Okay, any discussion?
Yes.
Go ahead, Nola.
With respect, I don't think this is appropriate. Some members of this committee have tried to do some version of this for some time. This is not of interest to all of us, and it's certainly not of interest to the board. This seems to be a proposed way of getting around a single participant service by using the collective EA administration service. I do not support that approach. I could ask then that funds from some other Cortes single participant service that I didn't want the board to vote on go into our administration service, so just East could vote on it. I don't want the board to vote on Cortes Fire Protection, which is a single participant service, because I think only electoral area directors should vote on it. So instead of funding the Cortes Fire Service, I'm going to fund the electoral area administration service in the same amount, so only you guys get to vote. I think this is a terrible practice and precedent. I cannot support it.
If I could speak to this, and I'm speaking in favor of this motion. I know that the Comox Valley does have a grant and aid electoral area function where they consider all applications for grants and aid to electoral areas and allocate their funds together. They have meetings together, and that makes a lot of sense especially when an electoral area director or area may have, there may be multiple applications from the same organization. And it's a coordination effort so that you don't duplicate grants. You use your grant and aid money to the highest and best effect by putting your heads together and looking at what grants are coming in. I think it's excellent. Comox Valley's been doing it since about 2009, I think, when they established their electoral area administration function for grants and aid, and it works great in the Comox Valley. So, and they have 4 directors, just like we do. And, you know, if Director Anderson doesn't like this approach, she's, you know, she doesn't need to participate in it. She can continue as a single service and take everything to the board, but or through the normal channels that we do once this grant and aid thing is worked out. But you know, we really have to get this sorted out, because what we need to do is to work together on it as an electoral area funding source and an electoral area granting. So I'm totally in favor, and I'm sorry I'm so tongue twisted.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Gerald.
Thank you. Yes, I agree wholeheartedly with Director Lee. And remember that this wasn't the original intent. The original intent was to have a electoral area grant and aid service, which was a totally legitimate request. The municipalities, by turning us down, have left us really with no other alternative if we want to, as Brenda has suggested, get together and coordinate some of our grants and aid. So this is the result of the direction the board has taken.
Comment, please.
Thank you. Sorry.
My understanding, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of deliberation at the board when the proposal for an electoral area grant came to the board, but I know that our chair sat in on the electoral area committee meeting where it was discussed, and she spoke against it at board. I believe the board decided to not support that because it was not good governance practice, and they wanted these single participant services to come back to the full board and not have some kind of workaround. And what is being presented on the table is a workaround that I don't think is a legitimate workaround. How can you use one service, you fund one service instead of another, just so you don't have to call it a single participant service? I can't even imagine this is lawful. I'm sorry, I think you're trying to go at something that consistently we've been told is not something that we should be doing.
Question?
Okay, well, the motion is on the floor. We've had ample speaking, I believe. Any further comment? Okay, all those in favor?
No, anyone opposed?
Anybody opposed?
I'm opposed.
Okay, we have 1 opposed. The motion carries.
All right, thank you. My second new business item is under electoral remuneration, and if Edith could put that one up on the screen, please. And due to what we could say is recent misunderstanding concerning meeting pay for public hearings, this motion will clarify this issue once and for all. And in this regard, I move that the electoral area remuneration bylaw be amended to the effect that any public hearing that has both a zoning amendment and an OCP amendment will be considered to constitute two separate public hearings.
There's a second.
Second.
Brenda,
Yep.
discussion? All those, anybody opposed?
No, hold discussion, please.
I did say discussion.
Okay,
Nobody spoke up.
I completely didn't hear that.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Nova.
The whole time I have been here, there's one public hearing when there's an OCP amendment and a zoning bylaw. It's the public speak to this, it's the same issue at hand. The public doesn't really see usually a whole lot of distinction between a zoning amendment and OCP amendment. They come to speak to the issue. We're there to hear about the issue. This seems like a pay grab. There's no more work to be done from our perspective when both are at play. I'm absolutely not.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Director Wally.
Yeah, Area B is certainly free not to make an expense claim for this meeting pay if they feel it's inappropriate, and that's what I expect they will do. So that's fine. That's their option. The rest of us can do as suits us.
Okay, that's a good point. All right, I'm not even going to say anything. Any further discussion?
Yeah, this isn't about what individual directors will choose to do. This is about the policy of the board and the policy of the organization. I found so many ways of increasing our pay in the last couple of years. I truly thought we were done with it. So to say that one director may or may not choose to claim it is not about what that director thinks about good governance for the corporation. I take exception.
Yeah, I would like to say that we did pass a bylaw some time ago that said a public hearing is a public hearing. And that was in regard to whether a public hearing was held at night, adjourned, and held again the next day or a day after or whatever. And it was at that time disputed as to whether or not that second public hearing constituted a meeting of a public hearing. And it was decided and passed that it did. I see this as being no different. It's the same thing. We have two public hearings for two bylaws, OCPs and zoning bylaws for different animals, and they're brought to the public differently. And in my past experience, I know some staff have looked back and not found this to be the case, but I think upon further investigation, it would be found that we have had, in the case of an OCP and a zoning bylaw, at the same meeting, they have been considered two public hearings. They have been opened and closed. Opened and closed. That constitutes separate public hearings. Okay.
Can I ask for clarification on that point from staff? Legally, does an OCP and a zoning bylaw amendment about the same property that go at the same time to public hearing, do they legally constitute two public hearings?
Mr. Chairman, if I could, believe that when an OCP and a rezoning or a zoning bylaw amendment are proceeding in tandem, they're considered to be one for the purpose of the public hearing. The difficulty of trying to separate those two into distinct separate public hearings can be quite difficult, and in some cases impossible. So we do tend to treat them as a single public hearing to deal with both bylaws and receive input on both bylaws through a single public hearing process.
May I chip in?
So,
It's Director Lee. I think this motion needs to go forward to clarify what's to be done, because we've had, some very difficult times knowing what we're being paid for. And there are public hearings I've been to, such as the Grigg Seafoods public hearing in Sayward, that went till 1 in the morning, and there's some that even adjourned till the next day. And you're dealing with 8 inches of paper that in an application that goes on in an OCP amendment and a zoning amendment, and it's a lot of work. And electoral area directors should be able to expect to be remunerated for those situations. And then there's situations that are less onerous, but everyone is being paid from the staff that attend, and the directors should be recognized as putting in, a lot of effort as well. So I think this just needs to be clarified, because every public hearing doesn't have to be followed by a debate as to whether we're going to get paid or not. We should know that in advance.
okay, appreciate the conversation and the comment. And I would now call the question on the motion as moved by Gerald and seconded by Brenda, that the bylaw be amended to the effect that any public hearing as both a zoning amendment and an OCP amendment will be considered to constitute 2 separate public hearings. Are there any opposed?
Opposed.
1 opposed. Okay, that is carried. That, I assume, will come forward as that will come forward to what day? That will come forward to the electoral areas to vote on that, or what?
Well, Mr. Chair, I think the bylaw would have to come back for us to take a look at the wording of it.
Correct.
Okay, so it will be coming back to us at electoral areas. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. All right, that brings us down to addendum, et cetera. We don't have anything.
No, Brenda's got a report.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I do have you written down here. Library report.
I'll be really quick. The Vancouver Island Regional Library Board of Trustees will meet on Saturday to consider the 2021 to 2025 budget and financial plan. The executive committee, which I chair, and I chair the board as well, has been meeting all summer to consider all the bylaw options, with the intent of trying to keep the rate increase as low as we possibly can. So we're going to be considering very reasonable and reduced increase over last year, anywhere between 0 and 1.8%, keeping in mind that the cost of living and some of our fixed costs and a big fixed cost for wages and benefits are around 2%. So we're actually, we can't go much lower, because we'll be just simply piling up costs that'll have to be applied in 2022. So it's up to the board at the VRL meeting to make the decision, but just to let you know that every effort has been made to reduce our costs as much as possible in this COVID environment, so that we're considerate of the of our levies and the payments to our system. So if there's anything you'd like to add, I just wanted to let you know that that's what we're doing.
Thank you, Brenda.
Welcome.
Okay, anything else from anybody on that? Hearing nothing, I would entertain a motion to terminate.
Move termination.
Seconder?
Second?
Okay. We're terminated. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank
Go
you.
off and have your lunches, and we'll see you back here at 12:30.
Okay.